So the self-disciplined mind, I think, would be able to separate that and say, I will worry about that when I need to worry about it. See, I haven't gotten quite there yet.
Yeah.
Develop self-discipline. Do those simple words sound very confronting to you? They probably do, because our society has a problem with being self-disciplined, and even just those simple words make us kind of clench up, and it sounds a lot more intimidating than it needs to. And I think a big part of that is because we don't understand what self-discipline is. And so Adam and I have been talking about that a little bit and thinking about that. Yes, hi Adam. In preparation for this episode, because I really think in order to stop settling in your life, you're going to have to develop some self-discipline. So we're going to get into talking more about that. But first, Adam is going to give our formal introduction to the show.
Welcome to Settling's Not an Option. I'm Adam Nebbs, and I'm here with my co-host Amanda Stanhope. This show is for anyone out there who feels like they've settled for an unfulfilling life. Whether you've settled in a relationship, the work that you do, or how you feel about yourself, we're here to tell you that settling's not an option. If you're liking the show, please follow us on Spotify, Amazon Music, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have any feedback about the show or want to recommend a topic, you can email us at cheers-to-not-settling@gmail.com. Finally, if you feel so inclined, you can donate to us on Ko-fi, where we're aiming to buy some new audio equipment.
Yes.
So the topic, self-discipline. Please note in the background that Amanda has a new cup.
Oh.
Does that say mystery lady?
No, but that would be funny. It's a mystery spot.
Oh, mystery spot. Oh, yeah, mystery spot sounds probably. I was like, mystery lady? Like, are you a spy or something? I don't know.
No. So that's this place. I think they have them other places, but there's this place in Michigan that it's kind of like this place, like a tourist trap place where like everything defies the laws of physics, like water runs uphill and
awesome.
All that kind of stuff. It's just funny. And anyways, it's a joke in our family because we say that my mom's head is a mystery spot. So I saw that cup and I'm like, that cup's going in the background today.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'm like, I'll see if my mom catches it. Although we just gave her the clue, so she'll definitely catch it.
Well, everyone keep an eye on that cup, because the cup, if you've noticed, changes every week, which I think is a really cool, fun way of seeing if you guys are watching.
Yeah.
So this week we're talking about self-discipline, and we will cover 3 15-minute topics, and I've got my phone ready to to time. So the 3 topics are what self-discipline really is and how it differs from being proactive, the fatal flaw of being proactive, and the addiction you have that makes developing self-discipline nearly impossible. So with that, I'll throw over to Amanda and I'll hit time.
Yes, awesome. So as I alluded to or said in the beginning, I really do believe that we need to develop self-discipline if we want to stop settling and we want to live our best life possible, realize our full potential, whatever you want to say. But I think we're so afraid of that word discipline just because of all these messages we've heard or that we are pumped into our brains all the time. Because Adam and I were talking about this before the show. There's this funny video by Frank James is his name. He's on YouTube and he's a really funny guy, but he did this like spoof video about giving 110%. And it's this whole thing about how you have to give 110% all the time. And, but that's what I think we've been led to believe, that if we're not giving 110%, we're not doing enough. And we're not self-disciplined if we're not giving 110%. Or we're not self-disciplined if we don't get up at 5:30 in the morning. Because I keep seeing, have you seen this? Like I keep seeing all these videos and things in books and whatever about getting up. Somehow there's this magic time of 5:30 in the morning that gets thrown out there.
I saw one from Grant Cardone, and he did feature in a couple of the videos I watched on self-discipline. But yeah, there's this one video and he's like gotten up at 5 and he's like, if you want to win at life, you need to beat this guy up. You need to beat the sun up. And like, look, not saying For any fans of Grant Cardone out there, look, he's got some interesting words of wisdom. But it was a video where I was like, ugh, like it
Yeah.
just means, I think, that if you don't get up at 5 a.m., like instantly you're like, you're never going to be a billionaire. You're never going to be
Exactly.
successful. It's like, it doesn't work for everyone. Like,
No, exactly. Well, and it's not like everybody's body is different, whatever.
yeah.
But there's so many messages like that out there. And or even just like studying hard, like I think even in school, which we were kind of talking about how school has changed before the episode too, but even in school, you're expected to be so disciplined in your studies and just even in your class time and all this stuff. And or I guess so that's what we have learned is discipline. Like sitting at a computer working on a paper for 5 hours straight is discipline. And it's not. So that's why I wanted to talk today, or we wanted to talk today. I guess I was the one who brought the topic up, but that we wanted to talk about what it really means to be self-disciplined so that people can start forming that habit in their life so that they can stop settling. So I guess that's a good time to give the formal definition of self-discipline. So I got this from Oxford Languages, and it says that self-discipline is the ability to control one's feelings and overcome one's weaknesses. So that's huge. So you're talking about controlling your feelings and overcoming your weaknesses. And it's the ability to pursue what one thinks is right despite temptations to abandon it. So that's the other part. The other part is that you have to be able to avoid temptations. So also, I'll just quickly, we can chat about that in a second too, but I want to kind of, what am I trying to say? Not contradict what's coming in to my head, but whatever. The counterpoint to that is that self-discipline does not mean being proactive either. Because, and that was kind of introduced in the first point here, that I had that in my head when I started. Of course, I wrote a post on the expectation gaps about self-discipline. And when I first started writing that post, I was thinking of being proactive and being self-disciplined as being synonymous. But obviously, when you hear that definition, being able to control your feelings and overcome your weaknesses, that has nothing to do with being proactive, because you can be proactive and not have any control over your feelings. So I'm curious to know where you think you fall on that scale. Like, would you say that you're proactive, self-disciplined? What do you think?
I would say if I'm really honest, like I'm proactive and I'm like etching closer towards self-discipline. Like I think in some domains of my life, I'm self-disciplined, but in probably the biggest ones, I'm not.
Yeah.
And the biggest ones, I think, are just thought patterns that kind of define my life.
Right.
That really shape how I view the world. And I think that's, for me, like I kept thinking with all these like self-discipline videos, what's the missing ingredient that translates that into the real world and makes it practical advice for people, right? Because it's all good with somebody like using these great inspirational quotes or being like, you need to do this, you need to be disciplined. It's like, okay, that's great. But how do I do that? And I think it really starts with looking inside and being able to pick up when a thought's kind of taking you down a certain path. You know, it could be like you're judging somebody else, or you're making excuses for yourself, or something like that. It's when you're able to go, hold on a minute, that's not helpful. How can I change that thinking for next time? And it's very hard to do.
Exactly.
Because most of the time, this is built into our DNA. But like I can see the benefits already from being able to question those thoughts and how they're translating into something better in reality, I guess.
Right. Well, and that reminds me of another thing we were talking about before the show. See, we
discussed a lot, guys.
We're just on it today. No, but we were talking too about how important a simple word can be inserted into a sentence. And I was just thinking about this. So, like yesterday, we also talked about how my husband and I went out for a drink last night because the weather was really nice here. And so we went and had a drink outside. So, anyways, point of that is I still needed to do a yoga video because I had determined I was going to do a yoga video yesterday. And so I still needed to do that. And I was getting ready to say to Dan, because he asked me if I wanted to have another drink. I was getting ready to say to him, well, I'm supposed to do a yoga video tonight. And I actually, or I should do a yoga video tonight or something.
Mm.
I actually stopped myself from saying that. And instead I said, I'm doing a yoga video tonight. So I probably should have another one. And it's
Good
like,
job.
but that's huge because
That is huge.
it just automatically changes your mindset. And that was, again, controlling your feelings or overcoming your weakness to say, yes, I'd love to sit here and have another drink. So I'm overcoming that weakness and avoiding that temptation so that I can get what I want in the long run, which is the strength and the stillness and everything that comes from doing the yoga video. So I was really proud of myself for that yesterday.
That is some really good advice because that is used. I'd say everyone does that all the time. It's like a cop out where you're saying something to usually your partner, being like, hey, I should be doing this. And then, like, of course, the response from them is like, don't worry about it. Whereas if you're like, no, I'm doing this thing, like, we've got to go, then it's like, oh, we're on. Okay, we'll change it. Yeah. Wow. I love it. That's great.
And I didn't even think of their response because that's true, because it does change their response as well. Yeah, because I was thinking more of it internally, of just how much it changes even your mindset.
Yeah.
Because now you've committed to yourself that you're doing it. But you're right. It does change their response too.
Yeah.
Because if I said, well, I should, he'd probably be like, oh, yeah, then we're definitely going to, like, or whatever, and so we probably would have sat there and had another drink. And that would not, what would that have done for me in the long run? I mean,
well, on the topic of drinking, it's like when you're at the pub and a friend says, do you want another pint of beer? And you go, oh, I shouldn't. Like, and what's their response?
Yes, it's I'm always going to.
And so your friend looks at you and goes, yeah, right, I'll go get another beer. And you go, okay, no worries. Whereas if you went, nah, I'm all good, thanks very much, I'm going to head off in a moment. They're not going to go and buy a beer because you'll be gone. But
because you'll be gone.
Well, they probably just drink the other beer.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But it makes me think of this one very good video from Will Smith, who will one day be on the show because we talked about him being the equivalent of Jesus. There's another episode. Go back and listen to it.
Yes. I'll have to link that one up so you can see that we really were not being sacrilegious when we said that.
It's all in fun, guys. I promise that we're not saying it for real. But in this video, and this was something that I thought was really practical advice, was self-discipline is when you're like, I want to go, I really want to go to that party on the weekend, but I know that I've got a test on Monday.
Yeah.
And it's basically that voice in your head that says, hey, I know you want to go to that party, but I know that if you don't study and you fail that test, you're going to be really hard on yourself. So I don't think you should do that. And he said self-discipline is when you listen to that voice and I think that happens all the time. So many times, say even if you're trying to eat healthy, which I've been trying to do lately, it's, there's a part of you that goes, oh, you deserve to eat that chocolate. Yeah. It's Easter time. Go on. But then the other part is going, but I know if you eat all that chocolate and you get fat, you're going to look in the mirror and you're going to be really down on yourself.
You get fat.
So, you've got to listen. You've got to listen to that voice that's saying, I know you want it, but don't do that because I know you well enough. So that's where you've got to listen inside, I think. That's good advice from Will Smith.
Yes, thank you, Will. Our buddy Will. We're on a first name basis.
We are.
But no, I mean, that makes me think of another point that I've thought about too, is that self-discipline can often sound like sacrifice. And so I think that's also why we don't like to do it, because it sounds like, oh, you're sacrificing this pleasure of having this chocolate. Well, okay. Either way, you're making a sacrifice, though. So if you think of it that way, you're either sacrificing the chocolate or you're sacrificing your waistline. Or,
Yeah.
you're making a sacrifice. Or with the studying, you're either sacrificing going to the party or you're sacrificing the grade that you're going to get on that test.
Yeah.
Either
Wow.
way, you're making a sacrifice. So which one do you want to sacrifice? And which one, I guess, which one are you going to feel better about at the end of the day? Like, are you going to feel...
is great advice. You're on fire today. 2 for 2. Woo.
But it's so true, but we don't think of it that way. Like every single decision you make, you have to sacrifice something. That's just how it is.
Yes. Yeah. I like that, because the voices in my head are always going, you deserve this because you did this other thing.
Yeah.
But every single time, like we ate chocolate last night. I didn't need the chocolate.
Right.
But I ate it.
Yeah.
And straight after eating it, I was like, why did I do that? So, like, I don't know. I feel like maybe the voice that's like enticing you to eat the chocolate, I don't know, this is just an easy example, but that voice is sometimes a lot louder or maybe more convincing than the self-disciplined voice going, you don't do that. Do you think that's the case, or do you think we just choose not to listen to the other voice, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think that I was called the hedonistic voice.
Oh.
The hedonistic voice is more fun in the moment. I mean, which I guess is what hedonistic means, but
true.
So of course we always want to have fun in the moment. So I think, is it louder? I don't know, but it's definitely more persuasive. But what I will say is that over time, I guess when you practice noticing your thoughts, and again, as if you're self-disciplined, you're controlling your thoughts and feelings. The more you do that, the easier it becomes, and I guess the louder your voice that tells you to stay away from the chocolate is. Last night, like my voice saying I'm going to go home and do my yoga video was louder than my voice that wanted to stay and have a drink.
Yes.
So, but it hasn't always been that way for me. So I think it's just practice, just like anything else.
Practice. Well, it's like what Kylie said when she was saying when you're trying to learn something, what she said, 10,000 hours.
Oh, gosh,
so maybe it's something similar for getting rid of the chocolate voice and listening to the yoga voice. You have to spend 10,000 hours.
Times. Goodness, I hope it doesn't take that long. But maybe. Yeah.
Well, that gets us to 14 minutes and 30 seconds. So we can move to the next, unless you have some parting words of wisdom.
No, I think that worked out very well. So we're good to go. All right. So do you want to introduce, or do you want me to say it?
You can jump into the next one if you like. Sorry.
We don't know what's going on here, people. Bear with us. All right. So the second point is we're going to talk about the fatal flaw of being proactive, because I kind of introduced the thought here already that being proactive is not the same thing as being self-disciplined, but I think that they get wrapped up in each other and we fool ourselves, because I've always been a very proactive person my whole life. I mean, even thinking back to when I was a kid, like I was just always very proactive. And what I really mean when I say that is that I was organized. I've always been a very good planner, and I've always been very good at kind of projecting myself in the future to kind of anticipate problems so that I could try to avoid them. I've always been very good at that. And so I somehow convinced myself along the line that was self-discipline. But the more I've sat and thought about that, I realized that that's kind of almost the opposite of self-discipline in a way, because you're not overcoming your weakness, because that's part of self-discipline, is overcoming your weakness. In those situations, when I was doing those things, I was trying to control a future outcome. And that is a weakness, because you can't control future outcomes. So I was not overcoming any weakness. And so I think that is a big trap that we can fall into. And before I get onto what I really think the fatal flaw of being proactive is, what are your thoughts on being proactive? Or does that make sense?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it until you broke the topic into two, and I think it's a really interesting one because I'd say people would quite often mistake self-discipline for being proactive.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, self-discipline is so hard. But like it's in the service, like it will serve a proactive life really well. And I think maybe that's why people could be really proactive, but at the same time stumble a lot along the way because they
Yeah,
haven't sat down and looked at maybe the weaknesses. So maybe when they're
right.
projecting into the future and thinking, what are the problems I need to overcome? They're just looking in terms of like, they're anticipating the problem, but they're not like looking at, well, my feelings and my preconceptions or just ways of being and habits,
Yeah,
that
right.
those will be the things that I have to deal with right now if I really want to avoid that problem.
Yep.
Because, I think people would probably still encounter those problems, or they might have other problems that they didn't think about because they haven't really considered themselves in the equation and the flaws in themselves maybe.
Yeah, no, I like that because I didn't really think of it in that way either. That you're not getting to the root of the problem. So
Mm,
it's funny because you're almost trying to prevent fires so you don't have to put out fires, but in the process, you are almost creating fires because you're trying to plan something out so much that there's no way that it's going to work out that way because that's just not
mm,
how life is. And then when it doesn't work out that way and your expectations haven't been met, then all of a sudden you are overwhelmed and now you're not overcoming your weaknesses and you're not controlling your feelings. So now you're not self-disciplined all of a sudden.
mm.
Yeah,
Yes.
it almost leads you to not. I think if you're good at being self-disciplined, it will make you be proactive, like naturally.
Yes, I
I
think so.
think the being proactive doesn't necessarily go the other way around. Like being proactive
Mm,
doesn't necessarily make you self-disciplined, if that
yes.
makes any sense.
Yeah. And it's because, I think, being proactive is a lot easier than self-discipline. Self-discipline,
Mm-hmm.
quite a lengthy process and involves a lot
Yeah,
of, I guess, maybe sacrifice, as we said, sacrifice. Um, that's not that doesn't feel like the right sacrifice because your brain's conditioned to be like, just let me enjoy the moment, let me just have fun right now. So maybe it's not as sexy in the moment, that
right.
sacrifice that you're making, which is why people go, nah, I'm not willing to be self-disciplined, but maybe I will be proactive. So it's a tricky one.
Well, and now you say that too, it's like maybe it just takes. Okay, so I'll throw my age out there because I don't care. So I'm 43, almost 44, and and I've had that blow up in my face enough time. I've had being proactive blow up in my face enough times. Maybe it has blown up in my face 10,000 times. It's quite possible. Well, and maybe some of them weren't even so obvious. Uh-oh, what
Yeah.
happened?
Oh no, sorry, just
Oh,
throwing the
no.
show off. I just realized my timer is not
Yeah.
going.
Oh, I
That's
had
okay.
mine. So we're good. I'll give
Cool.
you I'll give you a little clue when we're getting close, but
Okay, cool. Sorry.
no, that's good. So some of them might have been so subtle that I didn't even notice them. And so it's quite possible that I've hit 10,000 of
Mm,
those.
that's
And
interesting.
yeah, I didn't really think about that before, but I'm sure I have. So what I guess the point I was making is that self-discipline is probably just something, I think it's something we try to throw on kids, young adults, and maybe it's just not something they're ready for until, I mean, maybe you have to get knocked down quite a few times before you start realizing the value of the sacrifice.
Mm,
Because otherwise you're not going to realize the value of that sacrifice until you've had a few hangovers and you've or whatever. You've gotten an F on that test that you should have been studying for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I think it all comes back, I guess, to that quote. Maybe you can't put a young head on old shoulders, or maybe it's the other way around. I don't know.
An
I
old
always
head
think
on young shoulders. Maybe
that
that makes more sense, doesn't it?
that
An
makes more
old head
sense.
on young shoulders.
There you go. That was a classic for me. I do that every time. Whenever I come up with a quote, I'm like, I'll say it in reverse. I don't know.
Yeah.
Makes me think about Austin Powers. But
Oh gosh.
um, oh no, I've completely lost my train of thought.
Then
Well,
you
one
can't.
thing I was thinking about, and it comes back to the Will Smith video, was
Okay.
he was saying that when people hear the phrase self-discipline, it is synonymous with like a bad thing because
Right.
you're at school, as you said, and I'm not saying like discipline at school is a bad thing, but as a kid, it's like very regimented, very like you have to do this thing or you'll go to the principal's office or like you'll get in trouble and then your parents will be angry. Like, so discipline, or even discipline when it comes to parents and children,
Yeah.
again, it's, you're not allowed to do that thing. So I think when we get older, we go, oh,
Well,
I,
that's
I don't
true.
want, I don't want to live by discipline. I'm out on my own now.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's the thing, I guess, that we forget, because I know when that I was growing up, that I was like, I can't wait to watch the movies that I want to watch. I can't wait to, I don't know, people will think that I've got an obsession with chocolate, but I was like, I can't wait to just be able to pig out on bags of Maltesers and chips and blah, blah, blah. Like, because I was like, I can do whatever I want. I can go to bed whenever I want,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Because in my mind, I'm like, I'm breaking away from self-discipline. Being an adult means I can dictate my own life. My parents could dictate my life, but now I can dictate my own.
Yeah.
But again, that's a problem, right?
That's a
Because
great
then you
point.
start to push the envelope too far and listen to that hedonistic voice too much.
Right.
And yeah, so in a way, I guess the point I was trying to make with the quote was that you do have to go through all of those incorrect decisions or poor decisions to finally one day go, I'm really over this, and then get to that point of self-discipline that your
Yeah.
parents were trying to teach you that you were resisting. Like, it's quite a crazy cycle
It really
that
is.
we all seem to do. Like, and it would be so much easier maybe if we could just flick a switch and straight away be self-disciplined, but no, we have to go through 10,000 hours probably of hangovers and bad decisions.
I think we probably do. You're right. But yeah, and it's interesting. Hey, I think that's the first time I've said interesting today.
It is. Well done.
But it's interesting that when you develop self-discipline, you actually have more freedom than when you're undisciplined. But we don't think of it that way.
No.
But do you agree with that, or does that make?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, okay. but no, that's very true. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. So all right. So I do have to. We're about 5 minutes left. So I do have to unveil the fatal flaw of being proactive, which was the point that we were making in this segment. So, in my opinion, the fatal flaw of being proactive is that it creates rigidity in your life, because now, like I said, this means that you're very organized, that you're planning, that you're projecting things into the future. So all of a sudden now you've created this rigidity in your life where everything has to go according to that plan, or you're going to just go off the rails for some reason. And believe me, I've been there a million times, and I still end up there sometimes still. So, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, because yes, I am right there with you, with anybody else who's dealing with that. But if we go back to the definition of self-discipline, which in the end of that definition said that the ability to pursue what one thinks is right despite temptations to abandon it. And as I thought about this, I'm like, well, what greater temptation is there to abandon your plan or abandon your ultimate goal that you're trying to reach than a plan that, or what am I trying to say? So you have this plan that anticipates all of the future problems that you think you're gonna have, and that it gives you a great temptation to then deviate from what's really right for you. Because now all of a sudden you have this plan and you're like, no matter what happens, I'm following that plan. Because I think I've laid out I think I've anticipated all the problems and everything. So I'm just going to keep following this plan. But self-discipline would say, and that's a big temptation, is just to keep following that plan. But self-discipline would say that you need to pay attention to your thoughts and feelings and change that plan accordingly.
Yes. Well said.
So that's the fatal flaw, I guess, of being proactive. And again, not that being proactive in and of itself is bad, but it's important to understand the weaknesses of it, I think, so we don't fall into that trap.
Yeah, definitely.
So what?
Well, I'm thinking on that is why maybe it is so hard, like, to go from being proactive into self-discipline. Because maybe that's it. That so many of us, that are in that proactive space do become so rigid and hold on to our plan so tightly that we're like, okay, I figured it out now. I know where I'm going. And therefore I'm not going to deviate. I'm not going to deviate no matter the circumstances. I'm on the right track. But that is a fool's venture, because it will eventually mean that things will pop up unexpectedly, or maybe like negative thought patterns or limiting thought patterns come into your head that you're not looking at. And, and they then start to steer you off the path. Like, it almost makes me think of Eckhart Tolle when he's talking about like the awakened modality of enthusiasm.
Okay.
And people who are enthusiastic about something. And he said what can happen very easily is the ego can creep into that, right? So they could be really enthusiastic about changing the world for the better. I want to help the needy or whatever it is. Yeah. But then maybe because they're like, so I'm enthusiastic about that cause and that's my path, so I'm not going to deviate from that path. But maybe because you're not looking inwards regularly to say, all right, what are my emotions saying? What are my thoughts saying? Then like things like the ego can creep in and start to manipulate what was initially a really good path. So I think you're right. That's where we probably go wrong.
Right.
And it's something hugely important. So we've got to be constantly paying attention, or else we will have that other beer at the pub when we know we've got to do the yoga.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all back to the pub. My plan was to have, even so, that's a good point though, because maybe your plan was to go to the pub and have 2 beers.
Yeah.
But maybe after you have that first beer, you're not feeling so hot for some reason. But you don't. So then you stop yourself and you don't go on to have the second beer. That's what being self-disciplined is. If you were proactive, you would have the second beer because you already decided you were going to.
Like that's in my plan. I'm not changing it. Yeah,
that's a great way to end that segment. I like it.
Oh dear.
All right. So,
do you want me to introduce the third topic?
Sure.
So the third topic is the addiction you have that makes developing self-discipline nearly impossible. And I'm super excited for this because
I knew you would be.
Amanda's show notes were really good.
I knew when she saw the name Joe Dispenza, you were going to be deep. I'll reference Joe Dispenza a bit in this clip or this episode, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. I'm just going to move on. So I do believe that we are most of the population, probably, I feel pretty safe in saying that most of the population is addicted to stress. And that is the addiction that makes developing self-discipline nearly impossible. And so this is according to Joe Dispenza. So according to him, stress is a state of a mental or emotional strain or tension that occurs when we can't predict the future outcome. So we talked about that. We can't control a situation, or we perceive that we are threatened by something. So I thought about this and in how it relates to self-discipline. is that self-discipline is really the exact opposite of stress, if you think about it. And I guess that goes back to what we were talking about in the previous segment too, of when you are self-disciplined, you actually have more freedom. Because if we are self-disciplined, going back to the definition, we know how to control our feelings, we know how to overcome our weaknesses. So we would not experience stress, because if we go back to it, stress occurs when we can't predict the future outcome and we can't control a situation or we perceive a threat. So we wouldn't experience stress unless there was an actual threat happening to us right now. Like there's an actual immediate threat. That's the only time we would experience it. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on my take on that.
Yeah, this one was really interesting for me. I had to think a lot on it. Like, I think because in the work that I'm doing now, there is a big discussion or lots of commentary on stress. And, stress can be a good thing. So, like, there's two sides to it. One is eustress, which is like quite useful, effective stress that kind of gets you out of bed, gets you pumped, and makes sure that you hit milestones that you need to. But then it can, if you allow stress to consume you, can move into distress, can move into burnout, can move into a whole lot of problems for you. So you've got to keep a lid on stress. But
Right.
I think you're right. I think society is built on an obsession with stress. It's the ones that have done well before us have been stressed and busy and non-stop, flat out running around. But again, stress in itself is not a good thing unless you're in control of it. You need to be aware of, like, what's your tipping point that will consume you, I think. And it probably is something that can cancel out self-discipline if it goes too far. So, to be self-disciplined is to keep stress in check and allow it to serve you rather than consume you, maybe.
Well, I have a little different take on that.
Okay.
Although
yes.
I'm not sure exactly what the right word is. So let me see if I can come up with it as I describe it here. So, like, you talked about stress being a motivator, and I understand exactly what you're saying, but I don't think that that's stress. Because, like, if you go back to Dispenza's, where did I have it here? I always have to go back to definitions. So it's based on not being able to predict a future outcome or control a situation or perceive a threat. So you're not doing any of those things. Well, maybe it's that you can't predict the future outcome. But I think a lot of what causes that kind of stress is more that I think it shows that you care about what you're going to do, whatever it is that you're going to do that day, and you care about it enough that you want to do a good job at it, and you don't want to disappoint people. I think those are the two big things. Like, you want to, and so maybe it's reframing it and not thinking of it as stress, but then I don't know what you would call it instead. That's what I was trying to think of. Because I think automatically when you call it stress, it has a bad connotation to it.
Yes, yeah.
But I know what you mean. It's not, but yeah, it's a completely different kind of stress. It's more like, I guess, what, like a professional basketball player. Now, we are suburban basketball players. I don't think we talk about that on camera yet, but
inside joke.
Sorry, people, that's an inside joke. But it's like a professional basketball player would have nerves before a game, but it's not like nerves that are going to necessarily stop him or her from playing a good game. It's more something that's getting pumped up for the game.
This has made me think of something. Again, this video from Will Smith. It was a good one.
Will Smith again. Woo.
I'm just dropping him a lot. No, he was talking about fear.
Okay.
And he was specifically talking about, the fear that people have in the build up to, say, jumping out of an airplane.
Okay.
Which I personally would not do. I've got lots of friends that would, but for me, no.
No.
I would not do that.
Okay.
I would definitely not do it. But he says, like the build up to that event, you have the choice. Before you jump out of that plane, you have the choice to say, no, I'm not going to do this. He's like, but we'll spend a week completely consumed. You won't be able to enjoy your breakfast the morning of the jump. You won't be able to enjoy like work and the build up to it because you're so like worried and fearful and scared. Like, oh my God, what if it goes wrong? He said, but what a complete waste of time, like to be scared of those things. Because he said, you have the choice to say no. You're always in control. And at the end of the day, like as soon as you jump out of that plane, that fear will probably go because it's happening, you're doing it. And so he was kind of talking about that in relation to self-discipline being like it was his ability in the industry to push through his fear that so many people are consumed by, to say, I'm not like, fear's still there, but I'm not going to allow it to destroy my enjoyment of life, I guess. Like, in that example, though, I don't think it would change my mind in jumping out of a plane. Sorry, I'm not going to do that.
Well, no, but the lead up to it, I think, is the important part.
Yes.
Because there, you're not being self-disciplined because you're not controlling your thoughts and feelings. Because if you were, you would be saying, I don't need to worry about that until I'm up in that plane.
Yeah.
Or until that day of. Maybe I don't even go up in the plane. But like 10 days out, I don't have any reason. There's no immediate threat 10 days out. Or even one day out. There's no immediate threat. I don't need to be worrying about this right now. So the self-disciplined mind, I think, would be able to separate that and say, I will worry about that when I need to worry about it. See, I haven't gotten quite there yet. I'm getting closer, but I'm not quite there yet because I will worry about something days in advance.
Yeah, so that's the next part. I don't know how you do that. So sorry, there's some non-practical advice.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't know that there's advice in there other than just to let people know that they're not the only ones that deal with that, because I think that's a trap that we fall into too, is we feel like everybody around us is so self-disciplined for some reason, like, or I guess we assume like if somebody's achieved something that we haven't, we somehow assume that they're more self-disciplined than us, which probably is not true. Yeah. Like we're creating this story, going back to like Kylie's episode, like we're creating this story about ourselves and about other people. And that's really probably what's leading to the stress. So I think it's not, I don't know that there's any advice to take away other than just know that you're not alone and just to recognize it start trying to recognize it.
There was a question I had as well. It was in your notes, and I know you were coming up to it, but just about the chemical side that Joe Dispenza talks about. Can you talk about that as well?
Yes. So you may be wondering, how do we get addicted to stress? And it's actually chemical addiction, according to Dispenza, who is a neuroscientist. And obviously, I've heard this from other people, not just him. So I'm sure that there have been plenty of studies that prove this. But we end up being addicted to stress because we end up getting so focused on the outside world instead of our own world, or our inner world, I guess, that when we're too focused on the outside world, we try to gain control over it and we try to make all the unknowns known, and that's just not possible. So all of a sudden we have these stress responses, and then our brains will create chemicals. They are cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine are the three main stress chemicals that our brains create, and we actually get addicted to those chemicals. And so I'll read this quote I had from Dispenza because he describes it much better. So he said, we become so conditioned to these chemicals that, like a drug addict, we need the bad job, we need the poor relationship, we need a difficult situation in our life to keep getting that rush of adrenaline, to keep getting that rush of energy. And I can definitely relate to that, and I imagine that you probably can too, to a certain point. Well, it's funny. I do want to hear your take on it, but this just popped in my head. I actually just had this today because I was talking to Adam about this, that I've actually had extra time today because my daughter is gone to her grandparents' house right now. And so I actually had extra time. And all of a sudden I had extra time, and I actually felt kind of stressed about having extra time that I didn't know what to do with that time.
Yeah.
And so it's like you're so used to being go, go, go. You're always having those chemicals being produced. But then once your body stops producing them, you do kind of want them back. It is weird. I didn't even think about that when it happened.
Wow. Oh, perfect.
Sorry.
Now we're both stressed.
That was something to be stressed about, because that was an immediate threat.
That was you. So you're having withdrawals from cortisol, and you're just like, I'll just knock this over.
That was good timing. So anyways, are you having cortisol withdrawals, Adam?
Yes. Yes. And I didn't know that until yesterday when I read your notes, and I was like, because I've been like, I'll touch wood again.
Yeah.
I've been like in such a good place lately. I felt like life's going well.
Right.
And then I just find myself in a moment of quiet, and my brain's like, right, we need to find a problem. Where's the problem?
Yeah.
There's problems here somewhere. All right. And so it'll start being like, let's reflect over what's happened this week. Hey, this thing could be a problem. Let's make it a problem. And then it just like builds this thing up. But yesterday I could feel it doing its routine problem cycle, and it's slowly, because it'll start with a little idea and then it'll start to expand it.
Yeah.
But this time I like saw it expanding, and I'm like, what the heck? No, I'm not going to have a problem. There's no problem here.
No, like, that's awesome. And then noticed it though.
Yeah, I was able to stop it, but then I was able to say, well, okay, how can I now try and change the direction of it to acknowledge that there's something to do there, but it's not a problem. It's something that I can solve. Right. Whereas before I might have got consumed by it. But I hadn't thought about the chemical thing. Yeah. And that was the question I had for you, was like, you know, whether it's, say, our obsession with cortisol or dopamine when it comes to being obsessed with social media, or on a more controversial note, you know, like obviously people talking about mental health issues being a chemical imbalance in the brain.
Yeah, right.
What are your thoughts on like our ability to control these chemicals? Because that's difficult, right?
Well, I think the thought produces the chemical. I think. Well, let me look back at that again.
That sounds right. That kind of sounds like what Dispenza
was. Well, the stress responses, so this is, again, Dispenza, stress responses create the chemical. So, yes, I think it's the thought that's creating it. So if you first, I guess you first have to figure out how to be self-disciplined over your thoughts. And that's when the chemicals will stop being produced, or not produced as much.
I'm just going to write this down. This is some good wisdom.
But I don't know if it's a chicken and egg thing, or you know what I mean? Like, which came first?
Yeah, the chemical or the thought?
Right. The chemical or the thought?
Can we please make that the title of this video? What came first, the thought or the...
Yeah, right. Sorry. The cortisol or the discipline. So we got 30 seconds left here. But
okay.
But no, that is a good, but it has to be, so just to kind of end this segment, it has to be from the thought, because you know how they'll show on MRIs or CAT scans or whatever, that when you have certain thoughts and feelings, it triggers different parts of your brain.
Yes.
So I'm thinking those chemicals are only produced in certain parts of your brain. I don't know what those are off the top of my head. So if you have a thought that activates that part of the brain, that's when it's going to produce the chemical, I would say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I think actually it would be the thoughts. So it comes back to control your thoughts, which is probably why it's taught by so many people, whether it's, you know, Buddhism or like, I don't know, Joe Dispenza's spirituality / science kind of approach to it. That it is the thoughts, because they do say it triggers parts of your brain. I don't know. I think the amygdala, I don't know if that's the part of your brain that kind of goes, hey, there's a problem, or, you know, there's a threat.
Yes, it is.
But yeah, like that's very interesting. Well, that's nice to know, because reading it, I was a bit worried. I was like, oh, what do I do with these chemicals? But maybe it puts an onus on us that we need to control our thoughts, leading back to what you said about self-discipline. You must be self-disciplined, not just proactive, so you can control your thoughts, stop the chemicals, which will make you stressed, which will then stop you from being self-disciplined.
Yeah,
maybe.
It's a big circle.
It's a big circle.
But I will say, too, in response, in kind of my concluding thoughts here, and then we could do our formal wrap-up, but in response to the mental health question, I want to be sensitive to that, too. I'm sure that there are people who can't stop producing those chemicals just by changing their thoughts. They're probably, or that part of their brain must be more sensitive to producing those chemicals or something. So it's not like so simple as just for everybody that you just have to control your thoughts. But so I just want to put that out there, that we're not trying to say that, that's the case. But obviously, for probably a lot of people, that's the starting point. So, as we've talked, here's a few things that we've talked about in this episode. So, basically, what it comes down to, I think, is that self-discipline really, and if we're talking about controlling our thoughts, self-discipline is really about limiting outside distractions and really listening to yourself and doing what you know is right in that moment. No matter what your plan was, no matter how proactive you were in putting the plan together, it's listening to yourself, doing what you think is right in that moment. And I also think it's about not forcing yourself. So this goes back to what we talked in the very beginning, is about not forcing yourself to do something that doesn't feel right to you just because everybody else is doing it, basically.
Yes.
So those are my concluding thoughts. Do you have any other concluding thoughts?
No, I don't. I think that sums it up really well. So
Awesome.
thank you for bringing up the topic.
Yes, it was fun to talk about. So, all right. So you can like us, comment on our stuff, share our stuff, subscribe, do all this stuff because it helps us get in front of the algorithm gods. You can email us at cheerstonotsettling@gmail.com. And of course, you can be so kind as to donate as little as $1 to us to get us some different equipment here, some sound equipment, lighting equipment, whatever. We can do something so we can get out of that suburban basketball league category, maybe. So, with all that being said, we will say cheers to not settling. Take care.